number one Sahabi. Number one Sahabi. Number one. Everybody is like, we're waiting patiently, nervously, wiping sweat, right? Ladies and gentlemen, my dear brothers and sisters, the man, the myth, the legend, the greatest Sahabi of Rasulullah, without a doubt, in my mind at least, is Salman al-Muhammadi, salamullahi alayhi. And so Salman al-Muhammadi has attained a status that is so unimaginably high, so unimaginably gifted. Say our master Salman, salamullahi alayhi. And Salman, his story is amazing. It's not only inspirational, it's absolutely amazing. The story of how he became a Muslim, the story of his life as a Muslim, and even the last years of his life, everything about Salman, it honestly looks like something. It's like we're describing the story of an angel instead of a human being. So let's see, why is Salman number one? First of all, Salman al-Muhammadi is not an Arab, like many of the other Sahaba on this list. He's a Persian. He's from Iran. And so he was born in what was called at the time the Sasanian Persian Empire. And so Salman, salamullahi alayhi, when he was born in Iran, he was born into a very wealthy and very powerful family. They were Zoroastrian priests. And so Salman, in the beginning of his life, his family was Zoroastrian, but he always had doubts, right? And so one day, a group of Christians, because the Christians were very, very well tolerated in the Sasanian Persian Empire, they came to visit Iran. And so what ended up happening is that he heard one of them reciting a prayer, and he said to him, sir, what is this that you're reciting? He said to him, we're reciting the gospel. Would you like to come join us? And so he said, yeah, sure. And so Salman's father became enraged. He locked him up. He said, I don't want you talking to these Christians anymore. And so Salman realized, his time with his family was essentially finished. And so he ran away from home. He ran away with a group of monks, with a group of Christians, and they took him to Syria. And so in Syria, he would travel from monastery to monastery, learning under these monks, learning humility, learning piety, learning spirituality, learning prayer. And Salman loved it. He loved the spirituality. And so eventually, though, Salman began to notice something that really, bothered him. He would see some of these great scholars that he was studying under, they would hoard money and they would lie to the people who would come seeking knowledge from them. And so Salman, he was beginning to lose faith, but he would, each time one of his mentors, one of his teachers would die, before they die, they say, go to this monastery and study here. And so he moved around Syria and Jordan for quite some time, until eventually one of his teachers told him, he said to him, Salman, I've taught you everything that I can. Go to this place, and there you will find your next teacher. And so Salman went there. And so when he was there, there's a man, one of these monks. He's apparently like a miracle worker. And he's, every day people come to him with their sick, and he heals the sick. He treats them. And so when he saw Salman, he smiled. He said to him, Salman, I've been waiting for you. He said to him, the knowledge that you seek is not with me, but I can guide you to the person who has what you're looking for. He says to him, where is he? He says, he's in Arabia. The final prophet of God will come from Arabia. And so if you want to benefit from his knowledge, you must go to Arabia. And so he went to Arabia. And it is later said that when he narrated the story to Rasulullah said to him, he said, Salman, the man you described, the man who guided you to me, was none other than Isa, salamullahi alayhi. And so Salman, on his way to Arabia, he was captured and he was enslaved. And he was sold to a man from Banu Qurayza, which was a Jewish tribe in Medina, infamous for their hatred of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa. And so obviously, being a Christian, they were not very kind to him. And so, Salman, salamullahi alayhi, when he was brought to Arabia, he was brought there as a slave, and he was just eagerly waiting for the chance to escape, to free himself. And so one day in Yathrib, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came, and he saw Salman. And he said to the man from Qurayza, he says, how much will you sell him to me for? This man, you know what he said? He said, this slave of mine is really smart. He's not, of average intelligence. I'm not going to sell him to you for just a normal amount. And so he said to him, well, what's your price? And I believe the price he said to him, he said, I will sell him to you for 100 palm dates, or for the trees. And so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what did he do? He turned to the Sahaba. He said, which of you is going to help me get Salman's freedom? And so some of the Sahaba, they stepped forth, volunteered. Ya Rasulullah, I'll buy one of the trees. I'll pay for one of them. Ya Rasulullah, I'll plant one of them. Until eventually the Sahaba and the Prophet, between themselves, 100 trees for the man for Banu Qurayza, and they brought the freedom of Salman, salamullahi alayhi. And so Salman, whenever he would speak to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, the way he speaks to him is like a child who's been separated from his parent for a long time, right? As in, he's like, all my life I've been waiting for the day that I can meet you, and now that I've met you, I feel like there is no joy greater than this. And so all the knowledge that he had learned from the monks and the priests, all of it, he would tell Rasulullah, says, everything that you're teaching is confirmed by their books. Everything. Every last prophecy of yours is confirmed by what they have in their books, by what they hide. And so Salman al-Muhammadi, salamullahi alayhi, there's a story where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, when after the battle of Uhud, he heard that Quraysh had assembled all of their allies, right? All of their allies. And so they were going to attack Medina. And so Salman said to Rasulullah, he said, Ya Rasulullah, I would advise you to dig a trench, because this is what the Persians do. When they're fighting wars against their enemies, they dig trenches during sieges. And so Rasulullah said, Salman, through your suggestion, Allah will grant us victory. And so he ordered the Sahaba to begin digging the trench. And it is said, while they were digging the trench, the Sahaba came across this big stone. It was massive, and they couldn't break it. And so, it said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, imagine, he rolled up his sleeves and he was down there in the dirt digging with them. And so he said to them, he said, step aside. He took the pickaxe, and in 3 strikes, he reduced the stone to rubble. And so with one strike, he said, Allah has just promised me my ummah will conquer Persia. Second strike, Allah has promised me that my ummah will conquer Bilad al-Sham. Third strike, Allah has promised me my ummah will conquer Yemen. And so when the Sahaba saw this, they said, Salman, you basically saved us. And so the Muhajirin and the Ansar, Muhajirin said, Salman is one of us. He's a Muhajir because he's not from Yathrib. And the Ansar responded and said, no. Salman was freed in Medina, so he's one of us. Rasulullah, when he saw this, you know what he said? He said, Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt. He's not Muhajir or Ansar, he's one of mine. Salamullahi alayhi. And Salman, it is said that his position among the Ahl al-Bayt, he was so beloved to the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that Fatima salamullahi alayha, used to wear a veil around her face, not just the hijab around her hair, around her face, when she's among men who are outside Bani Hashim. So when she's around men from her own tribe, she's just wearing the hijab. Only around her husband and her family does she take the hijab off completely. But when it came to Salman, when Salman would visit the house, she was comfortable with letting him see her face. That's how close of a relationship that she had with Salman, salamullahi alayhi. And she would refer to him as my uncle, right? And so when Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, Salman was again one of the people who did not give bay'ah to the first Khalifa. And he was very vocal about it. I remember in his sermon to the first Khalifa, he directly calls him out. He says, what you have done, you have denied yourself the greatest of bounties through this decision that you have made. And so Salman, salamullahi alayhi, said that Imam Ali said to his companions, he said, if 40 of you are willing to stand with me, then I will fight these people. Only 4 of them showed up, and Salman was one of them. And so Salman was one of the people who was present at the funeral of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. So later in his life, there's a story. You want to know just how high a position Salman got? You have all the hadith in praise of Salman. Salman minna ahl al-bayt. What higher can you get? You want to hear how high the position Salman attained? Let me give you an example. Imam Ali, one day, him and Salman and Abu Dhar are walking together in Medina. And so they take Salman to his house, right? It's like before they go walking together, it's like Abu Dhar and Imam Ali are walking together. They're going to Salman's house. And Abu Dhar asks Imam Ali, he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why do you love Salman more than me? What does Salman have that I don't have? And so Imam Ali said, be patient and I will show you. And so they came to Salman's house and they said, Salman, come home with us. They went to Imam Ali's house. After they were done eating, they went back to drop Salman off at his house, and then they would go to sleep. And so after Salman went inside his house, he closed his door. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen turned to Abu Dhar. He said, Abu Dhar, look at the footsteps behind us. Abu Dhar looked at the footsteps. You know what he saw? He saw a pair of footsteps. 3 walkers, only 2 pairs of footsteps. He said, I don't understand. Was Salman flying and I wasn't listening? Was he floating? And so he looked at Imam Ali. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I don't understand. Imam Ali, you know what he said to him? He said, Abu Dhar, Salman has reached a level of Iman that only Allah and His Messenger understand. Say, how? Explain it to me. He said to him, Ya Abu Dhar, Salman once heard Rasulullah say. What did he hear him say? He heard him say, Aliyun ma'al haq, wal haq ma'a Ali. And from that day forward, Salman, whenever he walks, you know what he does? He walks in my footsteps. He doesn't take a step outside my footsteps. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he said this to Abu Dhar was like, Salman is where? I'm where? Abu Dhar has a high position, doesn't he? Ammar has a high position, doesn't he? All the other Sahaba that we've talked about, they have a high position. But Salman al-Muhammadi, what level did he reach? What level of Iman did this man reach? Only Allah and His Messenger and Amir al-Mu'mineen know. And so, when it comes to towards the end of his life, Salman, salamullahi alayhi, he was appointed the governor of Madain. He participated in the conquest movement. And there are some battles where he would go to the fortresses of the Persians and he would tell them, he would try to convince them to surrender. He would try to convince them that, this is the age of Islam. The Persian Empire is gone, right? It's over. Game over, guys. It's time to pack it up. And so eventually he was made the governor of Madain. And so when he was the governor of Madain, the people of Madain, this was the capital of the Persian Empire. This was the capital of the state he once left as just a normal traveler. He becomes the governor of it. And so it is said that when the people, they said, oh people, Amir al-Mu'mineen, meaning Umar has appointed someone as your governor and he's going to be here soon. And so the people, they're all waiting outside the gates. They're waiting for their governor to show up. They're expecting some man, in armor, a young guy. Who ends up showing? Salman shows up riding a donkey. This old man riding a donkey. He's like, Salam, I'm your governor. Like, wait, you're our governor? He says, yes, I'm your governor. And I'm a Persian like you. And so Salman, these last years of his life, he spent them as the governor of Madain. And as I noted, he was good friends with Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. Hudayfa was traveling between Kufa and he was traveling between Kufa and Madain. He was good friends with Salman. They would visit each other and they participated in the conquest movement together. And Salman, in the end of his life, I believe he was married to a lady from a tribe from Yemen. In the end of his life, right? It is said that, on his deathbed, he died, very, impoverished, we would say. He did not have many material possessions, despite being being the governor of the former capital of the Persian Empire. But when Salman passed away, Imam Ali was in Medina. Imam Ali, salamullahi alayhi, rode for 3 days from Medina to Madain just to lead the janazah of Salman al-Farsi, or Salman al-Muhammadi, salamullahi alayhi. And then he left, and he went back to Medina. And so Salman, salamullahi alayhi, I remember I mentioned this with the story of Hudayfa. It is said that when there was an issue with flooding in the area, and so the bodies of the Sahaba buried there were, uncovered. This was during the reign of one of the early kings of Iraq, during the early 1900s. And so it is said that when these people came to witness the reburial of the Sahaba, they say, we saw Salman al-Farsi. He looked as though he had just been buried. The grave had done nothing to his body. And so Salman, salamullahi alayhi, it is for this reason, and for the reason that I mentioned above, that I put him at number 1 on the list. No Sahabi of Rasulullah, I believe, attained such a status to where the Prophet says to them, he's one of my Ahlul Bayt.